Predator comes out now with a new power station, which they are getting into the game a little bit late, but I guess better late than never. Today we'll check this out and see how well it does. This brand new power station will come in at about $199 at the time of this video, and is equipped with a 294 watt-hour battery that is lithium iron phosphate. It'll come in right around 10 pounds and has a limited 5-year warranty. As we look at the front of the unit, it will come with a 12-volt socket that can handle approximately 10 amps and also some USBs, which this one does have PD function, so it can do 100 watts out or in for charging, and it does have a couple USB-A ports that can handle about 12 watts each. It does have a 350 watt inverter that can handle about a 700 watt surge, and again is 294 watt hours. It comes with 220 volt AC outs and is also a pure sine wave inverter and neutral floating. And it does come with a real simplistic display that is easy to read. If we look at the side of the unit, one side will be your intake and the other side will be your exhaust. As we look at the back of the unit, it will give you all kinds of information like the specs of this unit for output and also input, and then you can see you do have 2 charging slots on the back. This is where you can plug in a DC charging source such as a solar panel, which allows for about 120 watts max, and also your AC charging, which is only about 100 watts max. And if you look at the very top of the unit, the sticker does say fully charge this before first use or voids the warranty. Now this is going to come with 3 cables, your AC charging, also your DC charging cables, which this is your solar charging cable, so you have Anderson ports on one side, MC4 on the other, and your 12-volt socket connector, which this also does have the Anderson ports on the other side. Now this is a super basic power station. There's not really a lot of frills. These smaller ones like this typically don't need a lot of the kind of special things that we see on some of the other ones like Bluetooth and more. I've never really used Bluetooth and app functions more when it comes to small power stations, so maybe that was their thinking when it came to this one. When it comes to small power stations, most of the time I just kind of plug in the devices I need to charge, turn it on and go, and I'm not really monitoring it that much because I know that these can't really do a whole lot. This is for very basic setups. It's not going to be able to run your fridge for very long unless it's maybe a DC fridge. And it's also not going to run like, say, a CPAP if you wanted to take this camping. It can run a CPAP machine, but it won't run it for very long, as CPAP machines draw about 45 to 60 watts, give or take the type that you have, or if you're running a humidifier. Now when this does come to AC charging, it does have AC pass-through, and AC charging does allow for up to 100 watts max. Now even though it does say 100 watt max, the most I could ever really get out of this was about 75 to 80. That means it's going to take over 4 hours to charge this thing if it happens to be completely empty, which is kind of far behind the competition. There's a lot of other power stations out there in this same price range that'll charge in just over an hour or even if under an hour. So I'm not really sure exactly why they went with such low charging speeds on this. Now you can increase your charging rates if you wanted to by double or even triple charging. So you can add a PD charging at about 100 watts. So now this will allow about 175 to about 180 watts, or you can also hook up solar as well for another about 120 watts. Now we did do a simulation where I was triple charging this, getting around 240, 245 watts plugged into this, which definitely helps charge it much quicker. But honestly, this really should come with at least a 200 watt charging rate. That way this could charge at a much quicker rate, say just about an hour and a half. Now when it comes to solar charging this, it does have an MPPT solar charge controller, so that is the most efficient ones that are out there. So I ended up over paneling this and plugging in a 250 watt solar panel. I ended up aligning this that way I could see about how much I can get into this, and it would be consistently around 115 watts give or take. Sometimes it'd be slightly more and sometimes it would be slightly less. I ended up plugging in a more appropriate sized solar panel, which this one is 120 watts. It's actually a pretty popular seller, and this one is from Sunjack. It's very popular in the overlanding area as it is very small and compact. It also comes with a whole bunch of adapters, so you can charge a lot of different devices or charge directly from the solar panel itself. Now that solar panel, under the conditions that I had that day, was able to produce at least 100 watts consistently, with a peak sometimes of about 106 to about 107 watts. So a much more portable panel. It's a little bit more of an easier setup that comes with a carrying case and more. Now while you are AC or DC charging this, no matter what the conditions kind of were, this is a pretty quiet unit. Even when I was running DC loads or AC loads at max, this was relatively quiet. It only produced about 62 decibels with the sound meter right next to the exhaust port, so overall it's a pretty quiet unit. Now when it does come to the 12-volt socket, this is actually able to produce a consistent 126 watts, but I did find that I was able to load it up to around 150 to 160 watts before it would shut off. So this means it's actually able to fire up a diesel heater. A lot of diesel heaters sometimes can draw around 150, maybe even almost 170 watts for just a few seconds, which will trip the 12-volt socket on these. Now that depends on the type of diesel heater you have. Some of the newer ones are a lot more efficient. Like this one from H Calorie, this is one of the ones I did a review on, and so far has been working great. This one was able to fire up off of this small power station, and while it is running on high, will draw around 40 to 50 watts, give or take. And while it's running on low, you can see that it will definitely run for several hours, and it's only drawing in the teens as far as the watt draw, so it can run a diesel heater for quite a long time. It's not going to run it for more than one night without needing to be recharged, but if you are going to charge it the next day utilizing solar or something, or maybe your car battery, at least you can use it multiple times over a weekend, and then this could provide at least power for that and also your phones and more. Now we also did a DC capacity test on this from 100% to 0 just to see how much usable power I could get out of here. Now I did a consistent 45 watt draw. This was to pretty much simulate either a diesel heater on full or even a CPAP machine, which again, this isn't enough for a CPAP, but it just kind of gives you an idea of what the draw is. I was able to get about 273.5 watt hours out of this, which is about 93% efficient. Now when it does come to DC idle times, that's if you turn on your DC settings, which you can see this one is on right now. Now, I wanted to see how much power it would draw down over 12 hours, but this one actually has automatic shut off on it. So the same thing with the AC inverter, the DC side will shut off in approximately 2 hours. I found that it shut off in less than 2 hours. And then the AC inverter side is supposed to shut off in 1 hour if you don't have any loads on this, which is actually kind of a nice function because if you happen to leave them on, you're not letting this draw down power while it's just sitting here idle on standby if you forgot about it. Now there is no way to change that, but again, on a small power station like this isn't something that you're going to be running certain loads on and off at certain times. This is again something that's meant to be portable, use it over the weekend, charge up phones and more. Now when it does come to the AC inverter side, this is again able to provide about 350 watts. I did testing on this where I would draw 150 watts sustained for a while just to see again what the fans would look like, also checking the pure sine wave. And even at max load, it was still able to put out a good clean wave, but this one actually had just a little bit of noise on the wave at drawing just a little over 350 watts, which again, you're probably not going to do that with this power station, and it's not going to affect any of the electronics that you're going to use with this. Again, that's only for the most sensitive things out there. Now I did do an AC capacity test as well. I ended up simulating what it would be like again with maybe a CPAP machine drawing 60 watts, which is also a 0.2 C rate. Over 268 minutes, this was able to provide 255 watt hours, or if you're a guy who likes the real specific data, I did have a corrected power factor of 0.97, which then gave me a corrected 247 watt hours, which ended up being about 84% efficient, which is a little bit lower than we like to see as kind of a standard for power stations. Most of us like to see at least 85% or better when it comes to the efficiency, which that way you get more usable power out of this, because if you turn on the inverter, it is going to start using power just sitting here, or even if you have the machine just on. So as this is a small power station that does have a small inverter, so technically it should be a little bit more efficient versus a large power station with a large inverter is going to be less efficient because the inverter draws a lot of power as it just sits there, or as it has to invert that power from the DC to the AC side. So that's where you lose some of that power, is from that inversion, and also of course the unit has to be powered up from the batteries that are inside it. Now overall, it's a nice little power station. It's nice to see Predator get into the game. They are again a little bit late, and there are some things they are going to have to fix if they do want to be competitive. Now there are two major pros to this when it comes to power stations in general. Is one, the ability to be able to pick it up at a store. You can buy this at a store, you can buy an extended warranty, and if it doesn't work, you can literally take it right back and say it's not working, no questions asked, and away you go. versus trying to return some of the other name brands out there can be a real hassle sometimes, depending on the size of the unit and more. Another huge pro on this unit is also taking a look in the manual at the very back. You'll notice an itemized parts list. This is something you don't see with any power stations out there at all. Nobody does this. Nobody gives you the parts listed and also a parts diagram breakdown to where maybe you can actually buy the parts. I don't know if you can yet, but if they broke it down and gave you a parts listing, that typically means you can buy something. So nobody else offers that anywhere that I know of, not from EcoFlow, not from Bluetti or anything. So if you had something to where maybe you broke the case, the handle broke, whatever, it looks like you can buy those parts and replace it. And this actually doesn't look like it's very hard to take apart. And even by the parts diagram, it's a pretty simplistic unit. It's almost like they designed it to be serviceable, which again is something you can't do with some of the other ones out there, which they kind of should start thinking about that the more that these become popular, being able to service them to say maybe replacing a screen or maybe the BMS or the inverter. If you can do plug and play type items to service these things, that might be something other companies might want to start looking at. So those are really the two biggest pros when it comes to this unit. Now, some of the biggest drawbacks obviously are the AC charging. That is kind of like going back 4 or 5 years. So that's something they really need to look at. If they're going to make another run next year, they're going to have to up their game when it comes to that. Solar charging is about right for a small power station like this. It's not horrible, but at least you can triple charge if you want. Now, overall, it is cool to see Predator get into the game and do something a little bit different. Now, Predator did make a huge lineup of these, as you probably saw in one of my videos while I was at SEMA 2024. There's a whole bunch of different sizes going to be coming out. I don't know if I'll do every single one, but you can stay tuned to check it out. Let me know what your thoughts are on the new Predator power station, and I hope to see you in another video.